Hi, and welcome to another Wednesday's Word. If you're doing the same Bible reading that our church is doing through the daily audio Bible, you've just turned a page in the book of Daniel. The first half of Daniel is a collection of historical stories. It's about Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they are remaining faithful as exiles in the land of Babylon. So you see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refusing to bow down to the image that Nebuchadnezzar makes, and they're thrown into the fiery furnace where God delivers them. Daniel refuses to stop praying to the Lord, and he's thrown into a lion's den. You see the writing on the wall. These are all very popular Sunday school stories that even outside of the church, at least in Western culture, people would understand. Most people understand what the fiery furnace, even writing on the wall. I've seen movies that even take that translation from the writing on the wall, that you've been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found wanting. It appears in Knight's Tale and other movies. So these are all things that it's easy to see as a collection of historic anecdotes that don't have any connection together. And then suddenly Daniel turns the page, and in our reading this morning, we start seeing these dreams he has with beasts and the predictions of kings. And it's hard to step back sometimes and see the big picture. So that's what I want to do today. Instead of going through every detail about the visions and dreams and stories, I want us to see what this book was, in my opinion, written to really accomplish, which was to show what it looks like to be faithful in exile. Daniel was one of the first waves of exiles. They first exiled the nobility, the sons of the upper class. And so when Daniel and his friends were sent to Babylon, there were still many people living in Israel who were about to be exiled soon. And so when Daniel is living and this book is being written, it's written for people who are going to be living an exile existence, whether they're living under Babylon, or living under Roman tyranny, or even for us, living under American tyranny. We live as exiles. It says throughout Peter in Philippians that we are strangers and aliens. Our citizenship is in heaven, that we're exiles scattered throughout the world. And so we need to have that exile mentality. And what Daniel helps us see in the first half is what it looks like to be faithful. You see people who are excelling at secular jobs. They don't leave the secular vocation and start a little church. They don't start a commune. They don't build a bunker. They stay engaged in the city. They're influencing, they're shaping. They're helping Nebuchadnezzar and other non-Christian, non-Jewish leaders to have a thriving, healthy place. And in that place, their own faith is finding room to flourish. And when challenges come, instead of capitulating and bowing the knee to whatever's trendy, they go ahead and they stay faithful to God no matter what the consequences. And we're seeing stories today about pastors who are locked up for preaching the gospel. We've seen around the world people arrested. In America, it's people getting canceled from their jobs. Years ago, the CEO of Netscape, I believe, one of the web browsers, was fired because he didn't believe in gay marriage. There's people who lose jobs because they're pro-life, because they believe that homosexuality is not God's original intention, even if they're loving toward their homosexual friends and neighbors, they've lost opportunities. These are the things of what it looks like to live in exile. And so we see God calling us through this book to live, no matter what happens, with Him and His Word defining our hearts. Whether it's a little thing like how we eat, which we see in the early chapters of Daniel, where they refuse to eat the rich foods and the wine from the king's table, or in big things like bowing down to other gods, we're called to be faithful. And then in the second half, God gets into a lot of history. And so these prophecies from Daniel, if you really get underneath them, they're predicting the rise and fall of empires. We see Cleopatra poisoning her enemies. We see a lot of the intrigues that create the world that Jesus was born into. And we also get a very specific prediction about when Jesus would be born. And so the first half is, this is what it looks like to be faithful. The second half is, this is why you can be faithful. Because history is not out of control. We're not sitting here, at least Daniel wasn't, in Babylon thinking, okay, God lost, Nebuchadnezzar won, and now we're just going to ride this thing out and hope for the best. They knew that God was still in control, that God had a plan, that God could be trusted. And so all those visions and the way that they're fulfilled should be building our trust that right now we sit in America, we see China imposing tremendous tyranny over COVID policies across religion, putting down any protest against them. We've seen the same things happen to our neighbors to the north in Canada. It's been a perplexing political season. And in all this time, God's not staring at the midterm elections. He's not looking at 2024. He's not seeing this morning the Senate passing a marriage act that has no exceptions to religious liberty when it comes to same-sex marriage. God's not scared by any of that. God has a plan. God oversees the rise and falls of empires, and he'll see his people through. Jesus said that he would build his church and that the gates of hell would not prevail against it. Well, if the gates of hell won't prevail against the church, then neither can the U.S. Senate, neither can China, neither can be the situations in your family, neither can your health, neither can any drama that would happen in a specific local church. The gates of hell will not prevail against the church of God. And so in Daniel, we see a call to be faithful and a reason to be faithful. God is in control. And so even though the headlines are often frustrating, I just saw this morning, streets of Philadelphia, a policeman walking down the street and someone coming up and killing him just out of the blue, cold blood. It feels like our world is off the rails sometimes, but it's not. God has a plan. I don't understand his plan. Sometimes I wish he would give us just a little bit more information or tip his head a little bit more, but we do see things. We do see where God is letting the church thrive. We see so many people coming to the faith, especially in Africa and Asia and South America. Here in America, there's places where the church is thriving. The gospel is not dead. The gospel is still good news. Lives are still being changed. And so especially as we're coming toward the Christmas season, you can see I've got my Christmas tree behind me today. I think that's important. Daniel is preparing the world for the birth of a son. And then Jesus is securing a new heavens and a new earth. The kingdom of God is already at hand. But now our call is to live that exile life, to keep going and to remain faithful. So I pray that this helps you a little bit. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. All right, God bless.